So welcome to the first core science past paper run through. I just want to say before I start this that the 6 mark question in this paper will not be run through in this video. Your teacher that's in there with you will give you the mark scheme for those 6 mark questions at the end of this, just because it's a bit too complicated to mark 6 mark questions by video, because you might have questions about it afterwards. But if you have the mark scheme in front of you, hopefully you'll be able to get around, a sensible number for that 6 mark question. Also, just wanted to remind you before we started that there's you do get this equation sheet in your exam, so make sure that specifically in the physics section that you check this equation sheet if they ask you to do any calculations, because the answer probably is, the equation you have to use is probably on this page. So, first, the biology section. Question says, Simon is going sledging with his friends. Simon's body needs to keep warm in the snow. Why is it important that Simon's body temperature does not fall too low? So you could have any 2 of these answers. You could say that it could cause hypothermia, or you could say exposure. You could say it could lead to frostbite or death or unconsciousness. You could say that it would cause poor circulation. Or you could say that it could slow his enzymes from working, or the chemical reactions in his body could slow down. So any 2 of those reasons. The next question says, Simon's body sweats less to stop him from losing too much heat. Describe other changes that can happen in Simon's body to keep him warm. So first thing is that he might shiver, and you could get 2 marks for just explaining why that would help. So you could say he could shiver for 1 mark, and that would generate heat for a 2nd mark. You could also have that his body will increase respiration, or you could say he could increase exercise, or you could say that it will have less blood flowing to the skin, or you could say that the hair on the skin will stick up. And if you said the hair on the skin sticks up to trap air, that will be 2 marks just for that sentence. So any 2 from those ones, and that will get you 2 marks. If you only got 1 of them, that will get you 1 mark. And then that next question says, Simon's dad has some wine with his lunch. Simon and his dad had a snowball fight. His dad loses the fight. He blames this on the alcohol. Explain how the alcohol might affect Simon's dad during a snowball fight. So you've got to say there's 1 mark for the effect of the alcohol and 1 mark for the effect on the ability to have a snowball fight. So you could get a mark for saying blurred vision, and then means he can't see the snowballs clearly, so 2 marks for that. Blurred vision for 1 mark, and 1 mark for saying he can't see the snowballs clearly. Or you could say that it would have poor balance or muscle control, and therefore he can't dodge the snowballs, for 2 marks for that bit. So 1 mark for poor balance, 1 mark for saying he can't dodge the snowballs. Or you could say 1 mark for poor judgment, and then 1 mark for so he might throw too hard, or he might miss. So to get both the marks, you have to say an effect, and then how that would affect his snowball fight. Next question says, look at the picture of the virus that causes flu. Virus is 1 type of pathogen. Write down the name of 1 other type of pathogen and the disease it causes. So 1 mark for the type of pathogen. So you could have had bacteria or fungus or protozoa. And then you had to have something that is caused by that pathogen, so linked. So if you said bacteria, you could have had cholera. If you said fungus, you could have had athlete's foot. Or if you said protozoa, you could have had malaria. What you can't put is virus, so you can't have virus and something that is caused by a virus. And then doctors can use drugs to treat diseases. New drugs need to be tested. Write down 1 reason why they are tested. And that you could say to make sure it's safe for a mark, or you could say to see if it works for a mark, or you could say to find the correct dosage for a mark. Next question says, Rafiq plays rugby. It says, Rafiq thinks he needs a special diet. He finds out about diets for rugby players. Read the information Rafiq finds. So he says that, so the information says that a rugby player should be eating a diet rich in carbohydrate foods, moderate in protein-rich foods, low in fat, and include fruit and vegetables. And it says, suggest why rugby players need a diet high in carbohydrates. And that's because rugby players need a lot of energy, or they're more active. So you can't say that just the carbohydrates give you energy. You have to say that rugby players need a lot of energy to get that mark. And the next question says, the diet says rugby players need moderate amounts of protein. Rafiq knows proteins are needed for muscle growth. Rafiq also knows he could take performance enhancers to develop his muscles. Many people believe rugby players should not take performance enhancers to suggest why. So the obvious one would be that it's cheating, or you have an unfair advantage, that would get you a mark. Or you could say that you could get banned, or it's illegal, or you could say that it might have side effects, and all of those points would get you that mark. The next question asks you to calculate the BMI of Rafiq. Now it gives you the formula here for the BMI, and it tells you that Rafiq is 180 centimetres tall, and he has a mass of 85 kilograms. Now where they're trying to trick you here is that in the BMI equation, the height has to be in metres, but they've given you Rafiq's height in centimetres. Now, 180 centimetres is 1.8 metres. You have to divide that number by 100. So the mass in kilograms is 85, and then divide that by the height in metres squared. So 1.8 squared equals 1.8 times 1.8. So that equals 3.24. So divide 85 by 3.24, and that will give you Rafiq's BMI, which is 26.2. Then it says, is Rafiq overweight? And then use the information in the box to explain his answer. So there's no mark for saying whether he's overweight or not, but you must say that yes, and that's because his BMI is between 25 and 29.9. So if you just said that Rafiq's BMI is between 25 and 29.9, then that'll get you the mark. And the next question says, Rafiq finds out about the BMI of other rugby players. He finds out that most rugby players in the England team have a BMI greater than 30. Rafiq's friend tells him that high BMI does not mean you are unfit and unhealthy. And is Rafiq's friend correct? So yes, Rafiq's friend is correct. But again, that doesn't get you a mark. You have to explain why to get the mark. There's 2 marks here. The first mark is for explaining what unhealthy means. And unhealthy means that you have a disease, and not that you're overweight. So to get the first mark there, you have to say that unhealthy means you have a disease. And the second mark is for saying that you could either say that England players have a lot of muscle and that muscle weighs more than fat, or you could say that the fact that to be an England rugby player you'd have to be very fit to be able to compete at that international level. So first mark was for explaining that unhealthy means you have a disease, and the second mark for saying that muscle is heavier than fat, and that's probably what England rugby players have, or that you have to be very fit to be an England rugby player. Next, Jason and Sandra are investigating how plants grow. They start with 2 identical plants. They put one plant in the middle of a room and the second plant under a lamp. The only light in the room comes from a lamp. The plants are watered the same amount each day. Look at the picture, it shows each plant after they've been left for a week. So plant A in the middle of the room and plant B under the lamp. Jason thinks the plants look different because of the effect of the light. Suggest how, or explain how the results support his conclusion. So basically, if you said that plant A grew towards the lamp, then that'll get you that mark. Or you could say that the plant B, the one under the light, grew more. Then it says, Sandra thinks that plants might be growing towards the heat from the lamp. They think about ways to change the experiment to see if the plants are responding to light, not heat. They start with 2 more identical plants, put ticks in 2 boxes and to describe the best changes they could make. So the fact they want to see if the plants are responding to light and not heat means that you might want to set up an experiment that either stops heat from the lamp coming to the plants, so you could use a heat shield, or see if heat does have an effect, so you could replace the lamp with a heater and see what happens. So, on to the chemistry section. It says this question is about chemical changes. Look at the picture of some foods. There are the foods. It says lemon, apple, cabbage and carrots can be eaten raw. Meat is usually cooked. A chemical change happens when meat is cooked. Explain why it's a chemical change. So this is just asking you basically if you know what a chemical change is. And a chemical change is when a new substance is formed. So unlike water melting, or ice melting, where it's still water, a chemical change is where a new substance completely is formed, and that it cannot be reversed. So you can't get back what you started with. Or you could say that it's irreversible. And then Amir is baking a cake. He adds baking powder to the cake mixture. Baking powder contains sodium hydrogen carbonate. Sodium hydrogen carbonate breaks down when heated in an oven. Sodium carbonate, carbon dioxide, and water are made. Why does the baking powder help the cake to rise? And that's because this carbon dioxide is given off. So if you just said that the gas is given off or carbon dioxide is given off, then that'll be fine. That'll get you the mark. Or you could say that the carbon dioxide given off fills the cake or makes the cake rise. But it's all about that carbon dioxide that'll get you the mark. And it says, write the balanced symbol equation for this reaction. So when you're writing a balanced or a symbol equation in general, you've got to have the reactants on the left-hand side and the products on the right. So what you want to do is have a look in the question and see what it says are made. And it basically tells you that these three things are made. So what you want to do is put anything that is made on the right-hand side, and anything that is used, which is this, on the left-hand side. That's the reactant. That'll get you 1 mark, and then if you balanced it correctly, that'll get you the 2nd mark. So putting a 2 in front of the sodium hydrogen carbonate will get you that 2nd mark. So here are some displayed formulae for some compounds. The first question asks you to put a letter of the compound that has 12 atoms. Now atoms basically are the number of these letters. Okay, so how many of those letters? So the compound A has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 atoms, and so on. So the one that has 12 atoms is compound C, because there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Then it says write down the molecular formula of compound B. So compound B has 1, 2, 3, 4 C's, so it's going to be C4, and then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 H's, so it's going to be H10. Now it's important that you write the numbers in a formula lower than the letter and a little bit smaller. So notice that I've written like that. So you couldn't have this, and you can't have this. Those two are not allowed. This one is the correct one. And it says, look at the displayed formulas of all these compounds, explain why they're all hydrocarbons. So you've got to basically talk about the fact they've got hydrogen and carbon atoms. So first marker is saying they contain hydrogen and carbon. And the second marker is saying only. So the first marker is saying they contain hydrogen and carbon, and then the second marker is saying only. Then it says the next question is about fuels. Crude oil is separated into many fractions by fractional distillation. Look at the diagram, it shows a fractionating column. So there it is. And it says octane has a molecular formula C8H18. Write down the name of the fraction which contains octane. So you're going to write down one of these, and where they try and trick you here is that this is the number of carbon atoms. Quite a lot of students will look at 18 for H and then go, oh yeah, it's this one. But actually it's the C8 that's the important thing. So you're looking for C8, and C8 is between C5 and C10. So the fraction is petrol. And then it says, the next question, oil companies continue to look for more deposits of oil. New deposits of crude oil may be found deep underwater. To reach the oil, deep wells have to be drilled. Write down 2 risks to the environment that deep water drilling for crude oil might bring. So any 2 of these, you could say that it might have oil slicks or oil leaks or oil spills. You could say it damages the wildlife, or you could say it destroys habitats, or birds or fish would be killed. And another mark you could have is damage to beaches. So any 2 of those 3, so oil leaks, damage to wildlife or birds or fish killed, or it destroys habitats, or you could say it will damage beaches. Next question says, look at the table. The table shows the percentage of each fraction in crude oil. The table also shows the percentage of each fraction needed for everyday use. And it says there is not enough petrol to be made by fractional distillation. How does this table show this? So you're looking at petrol, so there's petrol, and basically you just got to say that the percentage made, which is here, 5%, is less than the percentage needed, which is 22%. You could also say the percentage needed is more than the percentage made, or you could say only 5% is made when 22% is needed. So you just have to compare those two values and say that the amount needed is more than the amount produced. Then it says more petrol needs to be made. The name of the chemical reaction which can be used to make more petrol is cracking. Write about cracking, include the conditions needed. So the first thing is you have to just write about cracking, say what cracking is. So you've got to say that basically cracking converts large molecules into smaller ones. So that's your first mark, saying that cracking converts or turns large molecules into smaller molecules. And then for the second mark, you've got to give a condition. So you could either say a catalyst, or you could say a high temperature. So first mark was saying what cracking is, and it converts large molecules into smaller ones, and then giving a condition, so either catalyst or high temperature. If you said high pressure, that does not get a mark. So next question about perfumes. It says, Julie wants to buy a new perfume. She finds 3 perfumes being advertised. She researches the properties of these perfumes. So, there they are. It says, Julie likes the smell of the 3 perfumes and they all cost the same amount. She does not know which one to buy. Look at the properties of the 3 perfumes. Choose the best perfume for Julie to buy. So, if you look at the properties, the best one is perfume C. So that'll get you 1 mark for choosing C. And then you've got to explain your answer. So you get a mark for giving a factor and a mark for explaining why that factor is important. So you could either say that the perfume does not dissolve in water for a mark, you could say that it does not irritate the skin for a mark, or you could say that the perfume evaporates easily for a mark. Any one of those 3 will get you the next mark. And then the last mark is saying why it's important. So if you said it does not dissolve in water, you could then say, which would mean the perfume will not be washed off or removed by sweat. If you said it evaporates easily, you could then say, so therefore we'll be able to smell it. And if you said it does not irritate the skin, you could say then, so it will not cause harm. So to get all 3 marks, you first have to put C here, and the second 2 marks for choosing one of those 3, and then explaining why one of those 3 is important. Next question. Julie's nails are covered in nail varnish. Julie washes her hands. The water does not remove the nail varnish. Look at these words. So there's dissolve, insoluble, soluble, solute, solution, and solvent. Using one or more of these words, explain why water does not remove the nail varnish. So you could either say that the nail varnish is insoluble, which means it doesn't dissolve, or you could say that the nail varnish does not dissolve in water, or water doesn't dissolve the nail varnish. So you could use one of those 2 words. So you could either say a nail varnish is insoluble in water, or the water does not dissolve the nail varnish. So on to the final section now, physics. First question in physics says, this question is about heating up and cooling down. Dave puts his cold drink into 2 cups. 1 cup is black and the other cup is white. He puts both cups near a sunny window. So there's the picture. The black cup heats up more quickly than the white cup and suggest why. So you can either say that black is a better absorber, or you could say that white reflects away. And if you put radiation, that's fine. So you could say black is a better absorber of radiation, or you could say white reflects. So black absorbs and white reflects. One of those 2 will get you that mark. Next question says, Dave tests how things cool down. He puts equal amounts of hot water into 4 cups of the same type. The cups have lids and are either black or white. Look at the information in the diagrams. He measures the temperature using a thermogram. And it says, how does a thermogram show different temperatures? So the idea here is that a thermogram using different colours to show the different temperatures. So if you put something about different colours, meaning different temperatures, that will get you that mark. And it says the water and cups cool down. Which cup cools the quickest? So here, you've got to choose cup A, which you get you 1 mark, and then explain why. So there's 3 marks here, so both these next 2 points you need. You can say first mark is saying it starts at a higher temperature. So you okay, cup A starts at the highest temperature, or it just starts at a high temperature, and then you've got to talk about the colour, and you've got to say that the black will emit more heat than white. So first mark is saying A, next mark was saying it starts at a high temperature, and the third mark was saying that it's a black cup and therefore it emits more than white. And the word emit is needed for that third mark. So you won't get that third mark unless you've used that word emit. Next question says, Dave heats some ice in a beaker. Look at the diagram. There it is. It says he measures the temperature of the ice as it is heated. Look at the sketch graph of his results. Which parts of the graph that show the ice melting and the water boiling? So when water boils or melts, when it changes state, it doesn't change in temperature. So B is where melting is happening, and D is where boiling is happening, because you can see that there's a flat line, so therefore the temperature is not changing. And that's where the second mark comes in. So getting both of those is 1 mark, and then saying that there's no temperature change is your second mark there. So you've got to remember that when something is changing state, so going from a gas to a liquid, or a liquid to a gas, or a solid to a liquid, or a liquid to a solid, there'll be no temperature change. Next question. Earthquakes produce shock waves. Scientists detect these shock waves. What equipment do they use to detect the shock waves? So choose one of those, and they use a seismometer to detect the shock waves. And it says, scientists study shock waves. 2 types of shock wave are P waves and S waves. The P waves and S waves behave differently in rock, and there are 2 states of rock, solid rock and liquid rock. It says, which states of rock do P and S waves go through? Complete the table by putting ticks in the correct boxes. So I remember that S is solid rock only, S for solid. So S waves go through solid rock only, but P waves go through both solid and liquid rock. And then it asks you which of these statements is correct. P waves travel faster than S waves, P waves and S waves travel at the same speed, S waves travel faster than P waves, or P waves and S waves are both transverse waves. And it is A, P waves travel faster than S waves. So that is the answer for that one. Next question says, S waves travel through the Earth. The S waves have a wavelength of 45 metres and their frequency is 120 Hz. Jack thinks the S waves travel faster than 6,000 metres per second. Jules thinks they travel slower. Who is correct? So it says calculate the wave speed. So this is a question where you should be looking at that equation sheet and finding the equation for wave speed. So wave speed, if you look it up, equals frequency times wavelength. So you have to just do wavelength, which is 45, times the frequency, which is 120, so that equals 5,400, and 5,400 is less than 6,000 metres per second, so you also had to say that Jill is correct. So 1 mark for calculating the wave speed, and 1 mark for saying that Jill is correct because it's lower than 6,000 metres per second, or slower. So remember, I've missed out the 6 mark question. You can get the mark scheme for that from your teacher at the end of this. So it says, phone masts send and receive microwave signals for mobile phones. Some people are concerned about having a mobile phone mast near to their house. Suggest whether or not having a mast near someone's house can be dangerous and explain your answer. So you can either talk about there being a danger, or you can talk about there not being a danger. So if you say there is a danger, you can say that there's possible health risks from radiation. You could talk about brain tumours or cancer, or heating the brain, or damaging body cells or tissue. So any of those. You could say that concentrated microwaves, or there's lots of signals emitted, or there's greater power near the mast, which is where the house is. And you could also say that lots of time is spent in the house, so you get a high dose of the radiation. So any 2 of those for saying there is a danger. Or you could say there's not a danger, because you could say that the mast is well above the house or a lot higher than the house. You could say there's a lot of fabric in the house absorbing the microwaves. You could say the microwave power output is low. Or you could say that you could say that there's a long wavelength or a lower frequency, so it's not harming the cells. So you've got to choose whether you are supporting, so you could say whether, it says whether or not having a mast near someone else can be dangerous. You have to say whether it is or it isn't, and then 2 of the points that I've made for either it is or isn't. So if you're saying that it is, you've got to say there's health risks like brain tumours or cancer or heating the brain or damaging cells. There's concentrated microwaves, or there's lots of microwaves given out or emitted near the mast. and you have to say near the mast for that point. Or you could say that there's a lot of, you spend a lot of time in the house, so you get a lot of exposure or a lot of microwaves hitting you. Or if you said that it's not dangerous, you could say that the mast is well above the house for 1 mark, or that there's fabric in the house that's absorbing some microwaves for another mark, or the microwave power output is low, or you could say that there's a long wavelength or a low frequency of microwave, so it's not harming cells. And then it says, it is difficult to make conclusions about the danger of microwaves to people using mobile phones and suggest why. And this is because there's not enough data to make a firm conclusion yet. And you have to put the word yet in there because there will be enough data eventually. So for 2 marks, you could say there's not enough data to make a conclusion yet. Or you could get singular marks for any of these points. You could say there's a lack of data. You could say there's not enough evidence that or proof that microwaves cause cancer. You could say that there's conflicting evidence. So there's some evidence that say that it does cause cancer and some evidence that say it doesn't. You could say that different phones emit different levels of microwave. Or you could say that that it takes a long time for symptoms to occur, so it's difficult to measure. And then the final question says, signals used for communication. There are 2 types of signal, analog and digital. Describe the difference between analog and digital signals, and you can use a diagram if you want. So analog signals look a bit like this, and digital signals, so that's analog, and digital signals look a bit like this. And basically you have to make a comment about both analog and digital. So analog can have can have any value or has values that are constantly changing. So that'll get you 1 mark. And then digital is either on or off. That'll get you the 2nd mark. So you have to talk about both to get both marks. That's the end of the run through. Remember to get the 6 mark question answers from your teacher at the end, and pick up the next paper to bring along next week.